In June 2025, Britain and Spain signed a treaty that seemed politically impossible. To tear down the border fence, the UK had to agree to a massive red line, allowing EU border guards to stand on British soil. Every day about 15,000 people cross the border between Spain and Gibraltar. Most of them are Spanish workers heading to jobs on the rock. The town on the Spanish side, La Linea de la Concepción, has 35% unemployment. Gibraltar has about 2.5%. They need each other. On paper, the physical border is gone, but in the fine print of that 2025 deal is a phrase that ruins the mood. Without prejudice to sovereignty. It means that after 3 centuries we still haven't solved the actual problem. That argument goes back to a single document from 1713. And in that document is a clause that has effectively blocked 34,000 people from deciding their own future for over 3 centuries. One side says Gibraltar is British. They voted 99% to stay in the British Empire. The other side says it's stolen land that belongs to Spain. They're both making real legal arguments, and that's exactly the problem. So how did Britain end up with a 6.8 square kilometer rock at the bottom of Spain? In 1704, Britain was fighting the War of Spanish Succession, a massive European conflict over who would sit on the Spanish throne. An Anglo-Dutch fleet of about 62 warships was failing. Their attack on the city of Cadiz had fallen apart because the British troops, and this is from the reports, disintegrated in an orgy of drunkenness. An attempted uprising in Barcelona produced nothing. The commanders needed a win. A council of war chose Gibraltar because it was, in their words, indifferently garrisoned. That's 18th century language for barely defended. Somewhere between 80 and 150 regular soldiers, depending on the source, plus a few hundred militia. On August 1st, 1704, about 2,000 Marines landed on the Isthmus. 3 days of bombardment, roughly 15,000 rounds fired. On August 4th, the Spanish governor surrendered. Britain didn't plan to keep it. Peter Gold, one of the leading scholars on Gibraltar, writes that initially no interest was shown from London in accepting responsibility for the administration of Gibraltar. British ministers considered giving it back at least 7 times in the following 15 years. On July 13, 1713, Spain and Britain signed the Treaty of Utrecht, ending the war. The British negotiators had realized that controlling the entrance to the Mediterranean was too valuable to hand back, so they wrote Article X. Here's what it actually says. It's written in what scholars call dog Latin, a clunky, simplified version of Latin that 18th century diplomats used for contracts. It sounds authoritative, but it's full of ambiguity. The Catholic king does hereby, for himself, his heirs and successors, yield to the Crown of Great Britain the full and entire property of the town and castle of Gibraltar, together with the port, fortifications, and forts thereunto belonging. That's the cession. Spain gave Britain the rock. But notice the specific phrase. The above-named property be yielded to Great Britain without any territorial jurisdiction and without any open communication by land with the country round about. Britain got a rock and the walls around it, not 1 meter beyond. And this is where the border dispute actually starts. That flat strip of land connecting the rock to Spain, the Isthmus, wasn't part of the deal. In 1713, it was neutral ground. Nobody was supposed to build on it. But in 1814, a wave of yellow fever hit Gibraltar. People were dying in the cramped city, so Britain asked Spain for permission to move civilians onto that empty flat land to build temporary hospital huts. Spain agreed. It was a health emergency. Britain never left. They replaced the huts with permanent buildings. Eventually, they built the airport runway right across it. To Spain, that's not just a border dispute. That's 200 years of squatting on land that was never part of the original treaty. But the Isthmus isn't the real problem. The real problem is what comes next in Article 10. And in case it shall hereafter seem meet to the crown of Great Britain to grant, sell, or by any means to alienate, the preference of having the same shall always be given to the Crown of Spain before any others. In plain English, if Britain ever gives up Gibraltar or changes its status, they have to offer it to Spain first. Think about what that means for the people living there. In most places, the population can eventually push for the right to govern themselves. But for Gibraltar, any move towards self-governance risks being interpreted as Britain alienating the territory. And the moment that happens, the clause says the rock goes to Spain. The UK government has confirmed this in writing. Under the Treaty of Utrecht, independence is not an option, unless Spain is prepared to agree. 34,000 people locked into a choice between British and Spanish by a sentence written in dog Latin over 300 years ago. Spain didn't just sign the treaty and move on. They tried to take Gibraltar back. The biggest attempt was the Great Siege, 1779 to 1783. 3 years, 7 months, 12 days. It's the longest siege in British military history. Spain and France threw 40,000 troops, 246 guns, and 10 specially designed floating batteries at about 7,000 British defenders under General Elliot. In a letter from 1782, King George III admits that he would rather get rid of Gibraltar if possible. But the garrison's success made that politically impossible. Strong as the Rock of Gibraltar entered the English language, Mozart wrote a commemorative piece. After 1783, giving back the rock wasn't just a bad idea, it was unthinkable. The Great Siege turned Gibraltar into a British symbol, but it was a 20th century dictator who turned the people living on it into a nation. Because the people living on that rock weren't originally British. They were Genoese, Maltese, Sephardic Jewish, Moroccan, Portuguese and Spanish. They spoke a language called Llanito, a mix of Old Andalusian Spanish and English. Until the late 1950s, 85% of children started school speaking only Spanish. So, what changed? In the 1960s, the United Nations was pushing for decolonization, pressuring European empires to give up their overseas territories. The Spanish dictator Francisco Franco expected the UN to force Britain's hand and deliver Gibraltar back to Spain. But in 1967, Gibraltar held a referendum. The question was clear: pass under Spanish sovereignty or retain the link with Britain. 12,138 voted to stay British. 44 voted for Spain. That's 99.64%. Franco was furious. On June 8, 1969, he shut the border completely. Land, sea, telephone lines, all cut. 16 years of total isolation. Overnight, Gibraltar lost a third of its workforce. About 13,500 Spanish workers who crossed daily. Britain flew in Moroccan replacements within 2 weeks. Gibraltarian women entered the workforce. The military baked the bread and collected the rubbish. And on Sundays, families would stand at the closed border and scream news across the neutral ground. Parents held up newborn babies for grandparents in Spain to see through binoculars. One woman stood at the fence in her wedding dress so her grandmother on the Spanish side could watch from across the border. Franco thought he'd starve them into surrendering. Instead, he did the opposite. English became a marker of loyalty. Being not Spanish became the core of a new identity. By the time the border reopened in 1985, the people behind it weren't just occupants of a British rock. They were Gibraltarians. Since then, the people of Gibraltar have voted 3 times on their future, and every time it didn't matter. 1967, 96.64% voted to stay British. 3 months later, the UN General Assembly passed Resolution 2353, calling the referendum a contravention of decolonization principles. The reasoning was that Gibraltar's colonial status destroys the national unity and territorial integrity of Spain. The vote didn't count. 2002, Britain and Spain proposed shared sovereignty. 98.97% voted against. The UK Foreign Secretary called the referendum eccentric and said the results wouldn't be recognised. 2016, Brexit. Gibraltar voted 95.91% to remain in the EU. The strongest Remain vote anywhere in Britain. They were pulled out anyway. 3 votes, near unanimous each time, overruled, dismissed and ignored. Now, if we are being fair to Spain, their argument isn't just a leftover from Franco. This is a position held by every Spanish government, left and right, going all the way back to Queen Isabella's will in 1504, where she wrote, "I ask and require of the kings, my successors, that they may hold and retain the said city for themselves and in their own possession." Spain's legal case rests on territorial integrity. The idea that a colonial power shouldn't be allowed to carve out a permanent chunk of another country's land. Legal scholars like Jamie Trinidad at Cambridge point out that the UN distinguishes between self-determination and territorial integrity, and in Gibraltar's case, those two principles directly conflict. Spain argues the current population was brought in by Britain after the original Spanish residents were expelled. So, in their view, the votes of 34,000 people shouldn't override the integrity of the Spanish map. It's a serious legal argument, but Spain has a contradiction to deal with. Spain holds 2 cities on the coast of Africa, Ceuta and Melilla. Ceuta has been under Spanish or Portuguese control since 1415, Melilla since 1497. Morocco claims them both, using the exact same arguments Spain uses for Gibraltar: geographic proximity, territorial integrity, colonial legacy. There are real differences. Ceuta and Melilla aren't on the UN's list of non-self-governing territories. Their residents have full Spanish citizenship and representation in Spanish parliament, which Gibraltarians don't have. Spain argues they're integral parts of the Spanish state, not colonies. But the parallel is hard to ignore. King Hassan II of Morocco once predicted that the day Britain leaves Gibraltar, international pressure will force Spain out of its African cities. Spain knows this, and it constrains everything they do. Which brings us back to the 2025 treaty. The fence is expected to come down once the agreement is provisionally applied. Spanish workers won't have to queue for hours anymore. For the 15,000 people who cross the border daily, life is set to get easier. But the 2025 agreement includes its own version of the same old phrase, without prejudice to sovereignty. The fence is set to come down. The question of who owns the rock does not get answered. And Article 10 is still there. The preference of having the same shall always be given to the crown of Spain before any others. The people of Gibraltar are a modern, democratic society that still can't fully govern themselves because of a sentence written in dog Latin over 300 years ago. They can't be Spanish, 99% of them have said so, repeatedly. They can't be fully self-governing. The Reversionary Clause blocks that path. And they're increasingly frustrated with being governed from London by a country that just pulled them out of the EU against their will. The 2025 treaty is set to make the border easier to cross. It doesn't change the contract that built it. If you want more primary sources analyzed, please subscribe.